Governor, dear students, dear friends, it's a great joy and a great honor to welcome you all to Sciences Po this evening for what, to my knowledge, is probably an unprecedented event in the life of this institution. We are reasonably accustomed to welcoming people from the sphere of politics and affairs of state. It happens to us occasionally to receive people from the world of the performing arts, but it's never happened before that we had the two worlds embodied into one person. And it is a great pleasure and a great joy for us that you agreed to dedicate a few minutes of your time in Paris to us tonight. We realize that there's been tremendous pressure upon you, since you're only here for a very few days, tremendous pressure upon your time. And we feel that it's a great privilege for us that you agreed to have this little moment set apart for a conversation with our students on an issue which we all know is very important to you. Having said this, I must confess that you, of course, you're a celebrity at Sciences Po as you are in the rest of the world. You're also, and this may not be known to you, you're also the one person who was quoted by the valedictorian of our graduate in class this year. She did not quote from Sophocles, she did not quote from Aristotle, she quoted from you, from a line of yours in one of your films, which I will not endeavor to quote in my turn tonight. So, by way of a very short introduction, I will not retrace your very successful early career as a champion bodybuilder or your later and still ongoing and even more successful career as a Hollywood star. I will only focus on your experience as the 38th governor of the great state of California. And I will remind our audience that during your 2 terms in office, you became a champion of the environment. You made a priority of protecting the environment and of addressing climate change at a time when neither issue was particularly popular within the ranks of the Republican Party to which you belong. Under your leadership, landmark legislation was passed, in particular the Global Warming Solutions Act. You launched the Million Solar Roofs initiatives. You initiated the Low Carbon Fuel Standard Program. And since leaving office, you have continued this fight and remained more committed than ever to this great challenge. You have done so through the USC Schwarzenegger Institute for State and Global Policy. I'm sure many in the audience have heard of the Institute, and so they know that it is a place which is committed to advancing a post-partisan approach to some of the most serious challenges facing the US and the world. That is to say, a place where leaders put people over political parties and work together to find the best ideas and solutions to benefit the people they serve. Governor, the students you'll be addressing tonight belong in large part to our Graduate School of International Affairs. Many of them are pioneers in the field of environmental studies, seen from the perspective of policy issues and the social sciences. And just before we came in, you reminded us how important it was to have a policy approach to these very political problems. Those students come from all over the world, and they are committed to developing a comprehensive view of those very same climate issues which are currently being debated in Le Bourget at COP21. As you can probably tell, they're very impatient to hear you, so I shall, in a very few seconds, yield the microphone to you. But before I do, I would like to acknowledge the presence among us tonight of another very important guest, another very important person. That is to say, Mr. Rajendra Kumar Pachauri, who, as you probably all know, was the head of the IPCC from 2002 to 2015, and who, in that capacity, received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 for his work for the environment, together with Vice President Al Gore, who came to address our students a few months ago. I cannot see Mr. Pachauri in the audience. There he is. Maybe. Welcome, Mr. Pachori. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. I've spoken more than enough, and so I hope that you will join me in welcoming very warmly Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Frédéric, for your wonderful introduction. It's exactly the way I wrote it. Thank you. And it is wonderful to be here today. And of course, Enrico is going to go do the Q&A afterwards, and we have a discussion which is going to be terrific. And I want to just say thank you for having me here today at this wonderful university. And I want to say thank you to people and the staff and everyone that has really helped us organize this event here today. I want to say thank you to Vice Dean Vanessa Scherer. Let's give her a big hand for the great work that she has done. And also my global director of the Schwarzenegger Institute, Barney Reese, who's sitting right out here in front. And I also want to say how excited I am to see Dr. Pachari here with us today, because many of you don't know that, but Dr. Pachari, or Bachi, I call him, has been a longtime friend of ours, and he, of course, was very instrumental in the beginning when we began our work, when I became governor in 2003, and sought advice. As a matter of fact, Terry Tamminen, where's Terry Tamminen, who was our EPA secretary at that time? Yeah, right there. And also another EPA secretary, Linda Adams. Where's Linda Adams? Is right here in the middle. But they both were there when we started our environmental policy. And of course, there was no one that was more experienced and that has really shown it through action, not through dialogue, but through action, which was Dr. Pachari. So we had him come and fly all the way from India, 15, sometimes 20 hours to California. And he always arrived there very tired, and then we pumped him for information and all that. But anyway, it was really terrific. And so it's so great to see you here and to see you also as, again, part of the negotiations and part of this conference of COP21. I, of course, have done many different interviews since I've gotten here, many different speeches and all that stuff, and it is really fun. And but I was really excited and looking forward to this event here today, because I think students are so important, because you're the future. And I think that if you get it and if you buy into this environmental crusade, it is really, really important. And I hope that this is not the first time, just the first time and the last time that I speak here today. I hope that I can say on the end, I'll be back. Well, I always borrow a little line from my own movies, but I'd like to also borrow another line from a Humphrey Bogart movie. He said, "This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." And I hope this is exactly what it is. So it is wonderful to be here today with all of you. Now, I stand here before you today, not as Arnold, the bodybuilding champion, or as Arnold, the movie star, or as Arnold, the former governor of the state of California. I stand before you today as a citizen of the world, born in Austria and made in America, and enlightened by my travels to every corner of our fantastic planet. People ask me all the time, it says, how did you, as a Hummer-driving conservative, become so passionate about protecting the environment? And I always tell them that it has absolutely nothing to do with my political affiliation or with my ideology. It has simply to do where I was born. I was fortunate to grow up close to the earth. The environment was our source of life, and it was also my playground. There were no trips to the grocery store when I grew up. My mother grew our food in her garden. We helped her pull out the carrots and the potatoes out of the ground, and we picked the lettuce, tomatoes, and berries. And one of my chores, as a matter of fact, was every morning to go to the farm next door and to milk the cow. to bring home that milk. Didn't matter what the weather was, if it was freezing cold or lightning or thunder or snow, whatever. I had to do that every day. And my brother and I walked 200 meters to the well to get the family supply of water for drinking and for bathing every day. We played in the fields and we swam in the lake, and the environment was absolutely everything to us. In my idyllic upbringing, I could not have imagined a world where our air isn't safe to breathe, or that over 1 billion people have no safe drinking water, or that we have verschmutzt the world. Those who don't know verschmutzt, it means polluted. It's kind of a German word. But anyway, I could also not have imagined that we would dump one day 40 billion tons of carbon emission into our atmosphere. Every year, by the way. I could not have imagined that air pollution would cause 7 million people a year to die prematurely. But I also could not have imagined that one day I will become governor of the great state of California, and that I will have the power to do something about it. And today I want to remind each and every one of you that you don't really have to be governor or president or any of those political positions to do something about it. We all have the power to do something about it. This is the challenge of our time. And this is not the movie world, where we have special effects and visual effects, or where we can rewrite the script to have a better outcome. This is the real world, and it is time to embark in a smarter path. It is time for a new revolution, a green energy revolution. In California, we were able to do exactly that. We were able to enter debate and to bridge the gap and bring people together around the solutions. And because of that, California now is 40% more energy efficient than the rest of the United States. Now, I want to share 3 lessons with you that helped us succeed. The first lesson is that subnational governments, cities, states, and provinces have tremendous power. We all here in Paris hoping for a Kyoto II treaty. And of course, there's no one that hopes more than me because I love sequels. I have to admit that. Like all of you, I hope that the leaders of the world come up with a fantastic agreement. But no matter what the negotiators do, let's not forget the power of subnational governments. Cities and states and provinces are working from the bottom up right now, as the international community works from the top down. When the federal government in America, for instance, was frozen and an international agreement could not be reached, we in California enacted revolutionary new laws, environmental laws. Let me tell you, it wasn't easy. It was a battle every step of the way. There were many roadblocks that were laid. People held on to the status quo. Everyone tried to fight us. Some people even said that it wasn't California's place to enact environmental laws, that we should wait for the federal government. And I said, the hell with that. We are not going to wait for anyone. The car companies sued us. The oil companies spent millions and millions of dollars against us. And even the federal government of the United States tried to derail us and say California did not have the right to regulate its own air because greenhouse gases were not a pollutant. Imagine that for a second. Now, we, of course, did not take this lying down. We fought back. And we took the federal government to court. And we fought it all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court then decided that, yes, greenhouse gases were pollutant. Well, duh. I mean, how much brain power does it take to figure that one out? But we were very passionate about moving forward because we knew the power of subnational governments, that we don't have to wait for the federal government or for national government, because 70% of the emissions can be controlled with state and local policies. The cities and the states hold tremendous power, and we must never forget it. This is why I'm here today, and that's why I'm here in Paris, to tell the subnational leaders, flex your muscles. Now, the second lesson is that we must terminate the old politics of division. Conservatives versus liberals, rich versus poor, the West versus the East. I mean, there aren't conservative roads or liberal roads. We all drive on the same roads. There's no conservative air or liberal air. We all breathe the same air. There's no conservative water or liberal water. We all drink the same water. We cannot put people's lives into ideological corners any longer. We must put aside politics entirely and only think of solutions. In California, we all worked together, and that is why we were successful. Republicans and Democrats, businesses and environmentalists, the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the academic sector, everyone worked together. We worked together and we created smart, green action. Now, under Governor Jerry Brown, our current governor, I'm proud to say that California has continued the march forward. Now, we are proving that a smart, clean energy future is not a party issue. It is a people's issue. He, Jerry Brown, is a Democrat. I'm a Republican. The governor before me was a Democrat. The governor before him was a Republican. Ronald Reagan, who started the Air Resources Board, was a Republican. So it doesn't matter in California if a Republican or Democrat, we are marching exactly in the same direction. We also must do away with the divisions between countries, between the East and the West and the rich and the poor. When politicians point the finger at China and say, look at all that pollution they're creating, this is outrageous, why should we even bother? It drives me absolutely crazy. Because we, all over the Western world, we are wearing made in China clothes. And we're using smartphones built in Chinese factories. We have exported our jobs in manufacturing to China, which makes economic sense. But 1/3 of their pollution comes from producing our goods. So let's not live in denial. You all have heard of money laundering, right? Well, what we are doing here in the Western economies is nothing less than emission laundering. It is time to get off our high horse and to acknowledge that we live in a global environment and that we all have to work together. It is time to stop the finger pointing, and it's time to stop the divisions. We have been presenting the data about climate change now for a long time. And this is one of my other lessons that I want to teach you today and that I want to tell you about. That there's one thing that we have learned in California, and this is we have to go and communicate much better. We have to communicate better because up until now the world has not communicated well this whole thing about climate change. I mean, we have been presenting the data about climate change and the stories about melting glaciers and rising sea levels. We have been doing this now for decades. Let's be honest, it hasn't been working. Einstein said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Well, we have been doing exactly that. Over and over we have been presenting the same story, but now all of a sudden we are expecting different results. It's time for a new way. My mission is to change the way that we communicate so that we inspire an unstoppable grassroots movement fueled by people power. There's no doubt that climate change is humanity's biggest challenge and threat. But we have to acknowledge that all of the charts and data and doom and gloom don't work. If you're struggling to put food on the table tonight, I can promise you that the temperatures possibly rising by 4 degrees in 50 years from now is the furthest from your mind. When we talk about melting glaciers and rising sea levels and impacts that will be felt in 2050, we build distance between the people and the problem. It is basic human nature. We are wired through thousands of years of evolution to focus on the here and now, on survival. Our overuse of fossil fuel impacts us right now. The fumes from dirty energy are killing us right now. We cannot accept 7 million premature deaths every year with a clear conscience. That is more than the vehicle fatalities, homicides, suicides, and all of the wars combined. This is outrageous. But every night we turn on the news and we see tragedy, we see car crashes, we see mass shootings, and we are rightfully outraged about all this. But air pollution, let's not forget, is killing 19,000 people a day. 19,000 a day. Now, where's the outrage about that? Just because we don't see it on the news doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We don't see the people sitting in cancer ward with tubes sticking out of their bodies. We don't see the family members grieving and comforting each other when they lose a loved one. We don't see their funerals, or we don't see their coffins being lowered into the ground. We don't see any of that. But 19,000 people are dying today. 133,000 people are dying this week. So why are we talking about sea levels rising in 2050? But of course, we can't just show doom and gloom. That is clear. No movement is ever built solely on doom and gloom or guilt. It never has been successful. We need to build the people up, not just put them down. We have to tell the success stories, the wonderful success stories all over the world. I travel all over the world. I see it firsthand, like in New Delhi. Even though you think India is very polluted, but let me tell you, when I was in New Delhi, they've converted all of their polluting taxis and buses with cleaner burning natural gas vehicles, which emit now 50% less greenhouse gases. Also, in Oslo, they installed LED streetlights and saved 70% of their energy and pollution. In Copenhagen, they set a goal to be carbon-free by the year 2025. In the United States, the solar industry, for the first time in history, is producing more jobs than oil, gas, and the coal industry combined. Güssing, a little town in Austria that has 4,000 population, is producing 100% of their own energy with renewables. In France, they have reduced its emission by 2% every year for decades. In California, as we have passed our groundbreaking environmental laws, our economy has been booming. This is the new economy. Renewable energy is coming on strong. As a matter of fact, I say today that renewable energy will do to the coal and oil industry what cars did to the horse and buggy industry, or what personal computers did to IBM, or what mobile phones did to telephone lines, and what Amazon did to bookstores, and what Netflix did to Blockbuster. We want to be cutting edge. We know that a green economy is a growing economy. We have to talk about that, not to make people feel guilty for driving a car or having a flat screen TV or using a fireplace or flying an airplane, or not to put them to sleep with charts and with data, and not to scare the hell out of them all the time. Our mission is to move forward as a united world and to inspire the people to join our diverse and inclusive movement, and to inspire the people to demand access to clean air and clean power. Remember that the greatest movements in our history, if it's the civil rights movement in the United States, or the anti-apartheid movement, or the Indian independence movement, or the women's suffrage movement in America that gave women the right to vote, all of those movements did not start at the halls of power. They did not start in the capitals. They started with ordinary people. They started at the grassroots level. And the same is true with our movement, with the environmental movement. We have a wonderful story to tell about our smart energy future. It is about time that we tell that story. So, ladies and gentlemen, I still dream about the environment of my childhood. And I know 100% that we can protect that dream for future generations. I know that we can build a smart energy future. We can break the pollution's death grip on our Earth. We can win this battle. We will win this battle. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. Now it's time for questions. So we have 2 micros there. You have to form 2 lines, and please go there to the micros, and we have time, but please do not waste time. And maybe I can start by asking you one question about the COP21. There we have a lot of people discussing rich countries, poor countries, and some of them are saying that but the environment protection is for rich people. and the poor countries are asking for subsidies, helps, money. What do you think about the relationship between rich countries, poor countries in the COP21 or in such big events in which 180 countries they meet, and countries with very, very different origins, level of richness, and so on?
Well, first of all, I think that Dr. Bachari is probably a better guy to answer that question, since he has always been negotiating on an international level. I don't. But I think that the point of my message was that, yes, there's all difficult kind of issues, but pointing the finger for the poor countries, the rich countries, and they said it's easy for you guys, but look at how we are struggling and all this stuff. And for rich countries to look at the poor countries and say, yeah, but you create the pollution and all this. I think this is not going to help. I think that we have to sit down and really talk about how do we help each other? Because we are living in a global environment. It's not just us versus them. It's all a global environment, and pollution travels around. So if you create pollution in China, if you create pollution in India, or wherever it is, it travels around the world, and we all suffer because of it. We suffer the consequences. So therefore, we have to find a way of how do we go and deal with that issue. And I think the UN is doing a great job with that, but it is, of course, a very challenging one. And I think when it comes to financing, this is where it's going to be very difficult and very tricky, because whenever you talk about money, as you know, the economy is not going that well all over the world. So I don't think that there are countries that really will have some extra capital left to invest in those other countries. But I mean, I'm sure they will figure it out.
So, there, first question.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Schwarzenegger. Welcome to Sciences Po. My name is Rali, and I'm from Morocco. If you allow, I'll deviate a bit from the climate topic to address another global issue that we are all facing as one people on Earth. California has been the victim of terror, just like Paris a few weeks ago. Whilst climate change is being addressed through conferences and summits, one can say that military action is the only solution that we are, for the moment, providing to these tragic and horrific issue. What do you think should be done in Paris, in California, and elsewhere in the world in order to prevent people from losing every inch of their humanity? Thank you.
Well, I'm not here to address this issue, because if I get into this issue, then this will be the headline, and then my messaging about the environment will be gone. So I let someone else address this issue, okay? The only thing that I want to say is that it is a different world. I think that we all have to be very vigilant. I think we all have to watch out. And if we see something unusual, we should report it to the police and to the authorities. I think that it is just, you know, the way it is now. And I think that the key thing is, in California, we are very proud of our state, because it's a state that has lived with all of the more than 100 different religions peacefully for many, many years and many, many decades. So we are really a great example how different religions can live together in harmony and in peace. So this was a very unusual situation that has happened just recently in San Bernardino. You know, like I said, we have to be very careful so that those things don't happen in the future.
Second question there.
Good evening, Mr. Schwarzenegger. Thanks for coming to Sciences Po. My question is on fossil fuel subsidies.
Where are you from?
I'm from the U.S.
Good.
My question is on fossil fuel subsidies. This week, the Climate Action Network, one of the largest coalitions at COP21 for environmental NGOs, put out a statement saying that the G7 countries plus Australia spend 40 times as much per year on fossil fuel subsidies as they've committed to the Green Climate Fund. My question is, it seems to really change the field towards renewable energy and towards a greener future. We have to really think seriously about our fossil fuel subsidies, and since they come in so many shapes and sizes, from my perspective, we need to approach it from a legal angle. What is your advice from your experience as the governor of California for helping us lead the world in addressing this issue?
Well, we in California, we are very much aware of that there's a total, it's a kind of an unfair way with the subsidies because there's so much more that goes to fossil fuels than to green energy. And we have kind of helped with that in California. So we give tax incentives for cars, for instance, that are energy efficient and that have alternative fueled vehicles, electric cars, hybrid cars, hydrogen cars, and so on. We give them the diamond line so they can travel faster. We have given subsidies for instance, solar. We had the 1 million solar roof initiative, where we give subsidies for that. And what helped with that is not only the subsidies to give people a chance to build solar, but also to bring the price down. And now the price is really at such a place that it is totally the same, even if not lower than regular energy. So there's all kinds of things that we can do, and that's what tax incentives are all about, is to change people's behavior. It's just been such a tradition to help the oil companies and to give them the subsidies. I think it's like $70 billion or something like that is given to oil companies every year. And I think that we can do much better to kind of even it out, the playing field. Government shouldn't really pick a winner. I think that the private sector, supply and demand will pick a winner. That's what I believe.
Thank you.
There.
Hi, Governor. I'm a fellow Californian, and as an environmental policy student, we've spent the whole semester this year learning about climate change as a global issue. But as someone who's concerned about fracking in California going on in the midst of an unprecedented drought, what's your opinion on balancing local issues, such as fracking, with keeping an eye on the 2-degree target?
Well, I think it is very important that we use every technology possible. So if there is a safe way to do fracking, we should do fracking. But the important thing is that it is safe. We have to have really tight regulations and laws in place, and they have to be followed. I mean, the reason why we had an oil spill and the reason why we have those accidents is because sometimes they don't follow the law and the rules, or sometimes Congress does not tighten the rules in a way where we really protect the environment. Because they, as you know, that in America, the oil industry and the coal industry, have some of the politicians in their hands because they give them the political contributions, and it's actually not that much. And we're talking here maybe $10, $15 million only. So it's not that much money that they're spending. They're spending on the campaigns and on the lobbying much more, but then actual politicians, it's not that much. But they would do then anything that those oil and coal companies want them to do, even though it is tremendous health risk, and we know that this is the energy of the past, and that we have to go and move towards a different energy. But fracking is a great way, and also natural gas is a great thing because it is 50% less pollution from natural gas. So I'm a big fan of that right now, and I think that we should develop that. Anything in order to reduce our greenhouse gases, and anything that gets that rate of 7 million people that die every year because of pollution down. That is the key thing.
Hello, Mr. Schwarzenegger. My name is Angel Versetti. You talked about the importance of financing, of course, for these issues, and you also talked about the alignment of the Republican and the Democratic Party. I work as a consultant at UNEP, and we have a project to finance sustainable businesses. 42 countries work directly with us. The United States is not. And one of the reasons for that, and all other G8 countries are actually on board, the reason why we haven't been able to get the United States on board is the split between the Democratic and Republican parties on the issues of climate change. In particular, the biggest challenge came from James Inhofe, who is the chairman of the Environmental Committee at the Senate, and ironically also consistently underscores the importance of the climate change. So how can we actually make this work? As you said, it doesn't matter which party you come from, but whenever we actually work with America, we see the split. The Democrats are ready to work, and I'm talking about a flagship project that is done under the auspices of Sustainable Development Goals. The Republican Party consistently, at all levels, denies access to basic negotiations to the UN. Thank you.
Well, I think that, thank you, it's a good question. And the bottom line is that just because today we talk about the environment, I think that you point out specifically the environment, but the reality of it is that in Washington, not much has gotten done, no matter what the issue is. So I wouldn't just pick on that. I mean, if they talk about immigration reform, you will have some Democrats that are against what the Republicans are proposing. If you have some environmental issue, you have Republicans against something that the Democrats propose. If you have a lowering the debt, the $18.5 trillion that we have in debt in America, if someone talks about that, then they're all up in arms and try to figure out how to derail that. So it's very difficult right now to get anything done in Washington. And I've been complaining about that for years now, that we haven't seen any action. We spent, $2.8 billion on that capital that we see so nicely on the shots and CNN and Fox and all those different networks, with the scuffling around it and with all the people that work in it, but there's no action. So under normal circumstances in the private sector, we just get rid of all of that and start all over again. But that's not really the way the political system works. So I think the important thing is also that the messaging has to be different. Because as long as we talk about things that happen 20 years from now, or possibly happen 50 years from now, or a decade, or 100 years from now, you will have a problem with people getting on board. Because they say, look, there are much more urgent problems right now. We're dealing with ISIS, we're dealing with wars, we're dealing with people, putting people to work, we're dealing with healthcare, we're dealing with people that don't have homes, and all of those things. So that is why I say it is so wrong to just talk about global warming and what effect it would have years down the line. We have to talk about that it's killing people right now. We have to talk about the amount of people that have cancer right now, the people that have heart attacks, that have heart diseases right now, lung diseases right now. It is an alarming rate. But for some reason or the other, they talk over there, and here, when you talk and see all the speeches and everything, they talk about all the stuff that's happening down the line, but they're not talking about what's happening now. I guarantee you, if the messaging is different, you will get many more Republicans on board. That is the bottom line of it, because we have done it in California. We have found out in California by accident, totally by coincidence, when the oil companies and the coal companies came into our state, and they spent millions of dollars to put an initiative on the ballot, to go directly to the people and to ask the people, would you vote to take all of those environmental laws out again until the economy comes back? It was Prop 23. The poll numbers were in favor of them. It was like 70% in favor of them, yet let's stop the environmental progress and let's just get jobs and get the economy back. And we put commercials on the TV spots and ads about rising sea levels. Didn't mean anything. About temperatures changing and rising, didn't mean anything. What effect is going to have on the fires around the country, didn't mean anything. But when the Heart and Lung Association put a TV spot together that showed children with an inhaler barely being able to breathe because they already have lung diseases and they could not breathe without an inhaler, that connected with the people. And our poll numbers started changing from 1 week to the next after this TV spot was played, and we won with 23 points ahead and beat the oil and the coal companies. So it just shows to you that all of the stuff that we talked about, global warming and all, didn't mean anything to the people. But when you talked about the health of the children in the Central Valley in California, which is the breadbasket of the world, that connected. And they said, oh my God, that's what we do to our children, where we have to protect our environment. And it all of a sudden clicked, and we won and then beat the initiative. So I'm just trying to tell you, we have learned in California that we got to message it differently. We got to talk about the urgency of right now rather than what's happening 20 or 50 years from now. Okay?
Thank you.
So, on this side.
Mr. Schwarzenegger, thank you for being here tonight with us. My name is Andrew Moffat, and I'm a master's student at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. There, I do some research on subnational actors and their contribution towards climate change, along with a number of classmates. And I think one thing that's been on our mind is the contributions of subnational actors. So I wonder if you could just talk a bit comparing subnational actors to national actors and how they contribute to climate change and how they may be better or worse placed. to do substantial changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have mentioned it in my speech that 70% of the action comes from subnational governments, from cities, the laws that the cities pass, that states pass, provinces pass. This is what really creates the main action. And this is why I always say that even though that we in America, during the time when I was governor, we had an administration that did not see it the same way as we did. We did not wait for them. We had our meetings and we negotiated with them, but when you sit in front of the environmental secretary, instead of minister, we call it secretary, and he looks you in the eye and he says, you know, greenhouse gas is not a pollutant, so therefore we will not give you the waiver to regulate your own air. So then you say to yourself, well, this is hopeless to work with those people. But we did not take this lying down, like I said. We went back and we said, what can we do? And we figured out that we have tremendous power and that we can really pass laws and we can really set the state in motion in the right direction. And luckily, we already had governors in the past that did some really great work. You know, like I said, you know, if it's Ronald Reagan or if it's Jerry Brown, who was then considered moonbeam, and everyone just called him all kinds of names because he started talking about, you know, renewable energy and about wind and solar, and people in the 70s didn't get that. But he started laying the foundation, and we kept hammering away in California, and California is therefore so far ahead. And the same is in Los Angeles. I remember when I was governor, we had a tremendous cancer rate, a high cancer rate around the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, because that's where the ships come in. And this is where all the diesel trucks come in to pick up the goods. So because of all this diesel, the particulate matter was very high. And so we, the local community, the state helped them, but the local community got together and passed laws to change the engines, the technology of the engines of those trucks. So it's not that the big truck was the villain, it was the engine, the technology that was old, which was the villain. And they changed it to electric and to hybrid and to hydrogen and all kinds of different technologies, or put modifiers on it and stuff like that. And it lowered within 5 years by 70% the pollution. So this was done on a local level, not on a national or international level. So imagine that if every city looks carefully of the kind of things that they can do. We have seen cities when we travel around, little cities and big cities, that have redone their streetlights. Imagine the amount of streetlights. Imagine the amount of energy that it takes to really power the streetlights and to change them to LED lights. Saves them financially right away 60 to 70%, and therefore also pollution-wise the amount of energy that you use. So there's so many things that local government can do. It is absolutely amazing. And so because we were so successful in California, we set out to not only look at it for California, but to really be a perfect example for the rest of the world. And so other states started joining us. And we became a model. And as a matter of fact, our tailpipe emission reduction that started in California, really tight tailpipe emission reductions, that everyone fought us, and the car companies all sued us, including Volkswagen. They all sued us. And in the end, we beat them. We fought and we fought and we beat them. And then the Obama administration in 2009, in May of 2009, made it a federal law. They used our model, the California model, and made it a federal law. So this is why I say the power of subnational governments, we can lead. And this is why we have created the R20, the Region of Climate Action, which has all subnational governments starting to join us. It's growing and growing and growing in importance, and that's why I'm here, not to be part of the UN negotiations, but to kind of let the UN know, don't dismiss subnational governments. And I'm very happy that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, for the first time this year, and also with the help of President Hollande and Foreign Minister Fabius, they have said we got to include subnational governments in the equation. And so this is a huge breakthrough for us, and for us really to have this kind of a power.
Hi, my name is Ian Bolliger. I'm a student in the Energy and Resources group at UC Berkeley. And my question kind of ties into the answer you just gave pretty well. And you've spoken about California's climate policy leadership over the last decade plus, and what it's done for subnational governments and national governments around the world. And my question is just where do you see California policy going in the next decade or 2 decades? So Paris being a good example of a venue with which California's policies can be displayed to the rest of the world, and I'm just curious kind of where we go from there.
Well, I think that the first and most important thing is that we have managed in the last few years to just really jump with our renewable energy. So this is such great news to know now that we have around 40% right now. And we will be at over 50% by the year 2020. So this is really extraordinary, and we're really happy about that, and so happy that Jerry Brown, our current governor, is moving forward even more aggressively. That's the great thing about this whole thing, because you have a governor that comes in and says, can you believe that Schwarzenegger, he did all these environmental laws and he's getting all this attention? I'm going to up him. I'm going to go, and I'm going to go instead of 33% of renewables, I'm going to say 40%. And the next guy's going to come in and say, oh, that's Brown. I mean, I'm going to beat his record. And I'm going to say 50%. And this is how it goes. But this is so good for the state. You know, I'm saying that he is working and is building on what I have built. I built on what he has built already in the 70s, and what Gray Davis, the governor before me, built. And so we just keep going on. And so eventually, I think by the year 2020, we will be over 50% with our renewables. I think that you will see more and more cars very quickly. The amount of cars growing very quickly of renewable, of alternative fueled cars. Electric cars are coming on really strong. Hydrogen cars are coming on strong. I just tell you an example. In 2004, at our international car show in Los Angeles, I asked the organizer of the car show, I said, can you display separately the kind of alternative fueled vehicles? And they said yes. I said, well, let's do a press conference and point out these vehicles. There were 2 vehicles there. Now, I proudly went there and made a big spiel out of the whole thing, right? And I said, look at this is the first 2 alternative fueled vehicles. Isn't this great? One is an electric car and one is a hydrogen car. And this is fantastic. You know, we're going to go all the way and all this stuff, you know. Well, the last year, in 2010, when I was governor, I went to the International Car Show in Los Angeles. We had 57 cars that were alternative fueled vehicles. 57. So in this short period of time, it grew and it grew and it grew, and it is really great. And now all the car manufacturers really know that the most cars are being driven in California. And California spends the most money on cars. If it is, the Bugattis and the Ferraris and all this, and they're all now starting to look. Porsche just built, a electric car that has 800 and some horsepower and all this. So we are seeing now the high-end cars and also the lower-end cars, all of them now going in that direction. It's a little bit too slow for my taste. I mean, I remember that when I was involved with Hummer, and we got General Motors to build the first, H2. And I told them we got to get rid of this engine and build a hydrogen engine. I said, wouldn't this be great? The Hummer is known for being the big polluting car. Wouldn't it be great if you have a hydrogen engine that has no pollution? They said, well, it would take us 8 years. I said, so what? I said, start working on it. Well, this was in the year 2000. In year 2008, when I was governor, I called them back and I said, can I see now my hydrogen-fueled Hummer? And they said, you really meant that? I said, yeah. So they went out just to please me and not to talk bad about them. They went out and they built one, a hydrogen-fueled Hummer, and brought it to Sacramento, and we displayed it and all that stuff. So there's only one around that is hydrogen fuel, that has absolutely no pollution, and all the other Hummers are made into biodiesel and biofuel Hummers and all that stuff, and change the other technology. But I mean, I think that California is going to go and see really great things. As a matter of fact, the legislature just has debated about reducing our fuel consumption by I think 50% or so by the year 2030. And so there's some radical ideas that are being thrown around where people always say, whoa, 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 what are you doing? But it's always how it starts. And then you debate over it and you can try to figure out how you can do that actually. So California is way ahead of everyone else in the United States. I can guarantee you that.
Very good. There.
Thank you very much, Governor Schwarzenegger, and again, welcome to Sciences Po. My question is directed, and I agree with the notion you presented of emissions laundering with regards to China and how the rest of the world is not taking responsibility for how much of China's emissions come from the rest of the world. But it is also true that, and it has been reported, that China has underreported their emissions by 17%, and this was just last month that came out to light. What can we do as students, as part of the world's population, in order to keep governments sincere when addressing the issues of their own emissions? In the case of China, I understand what you mean when you say that, that the rest of the world has contributed to it, but at the same time, China is contributing to a certain negligent practice of not being sincere about their own emissions and their own use of fossil fuels. So what can we do in order to address this?
Well, first of all, I have worked, because we're working with subnational governments, I've worked with provinces in China. And so I got to know the Chinese very well, and I know firsthand that as a whole, they're very sincere and very serious about reducing their pollution, because they see themselves that they're killing their own people if they continue this way, because there's sometimes so much pollution that is really dangerous to be out there. And so the people that I've met, including the head negotiator for the Chinese, they all are very sincere to try to come up with a way of reducing their pollution. And I just feel that it's an overwhelming problem when you have a 7% GDP growth or 10% GDP growth, and like I said, when the whole world is sending their jobs to China. But they have just adopted and this is again the power of subnational governments, our cap and trade principle of California. And when they go into this cap and trade, where they really cap the pollution that the industries can produce and the costs and all this stuff, it would change the whole thing. So I think they're going in the right direction. We all want them to be faster, it is clear. They, I think, are going to try to do everything that they can to reduce the pollution and to have renewables and to work out, I think they worked out a deal with Obama to build more nuclear facilities over there to create power as quickly as possible and to reduce the amount of coal-fired power plants. But in the meantime, you're right, it's very alarming and it is very dangerous, the kind of pollution that they create. And the same is with India and the same is with a lot of other countries, including the United States. Even though we have lowered our greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, and it's going down and it's going down and down, but it's not fast enough. I think that we can do even better than that. And so I think this is what this conference is all about, where everyone sits down and talks about that. When it comes to reporting wrong, the biggest problem that we had in California was when we got together with various different states. Everyone had a different idea on how to really figure out how to count the reductions of greenhouse gases. And this is the same thing as that reminded me when I was on my fitness crusade and we talked about reducing body weight. One guy said, well, I reduced my body weight, look at the scale, I have 20 pounds less. The guy still looked fat. The other guy came in and he said, I reduced and I improved by 20% too. I mean, look at me. I went into the water tank and I reduced fat, but I increased muscle mass, so therefore it really doesn't show up on the scale. I still weigh the same, but I switched things around. So therefore I should also get credit for that. So everyone came in with a different method of who is now gotten fitter and who made the most progress until we really established an international way of really determining of who really is in good shape and who is not. And so the same was with the measurements of this. There were people coming in and said, should we measure just the energy? Should we just use what is on the power lines? Should we use also heating? like in European countries, they use also the heating and all of that, the gas and all this stuff. Should we use also transportation when we talk about greenhouse gas reduction? How should we measure all this? And so sometimes, the Chinese have one way of measuring it. And also, this is why it's important to get together the international community. We in California spent literally 3 days just talking about how to really measure the reductions of greenhouse gases so that everyone in the United States is in sync, that we're talking the same language. And so now imagine doing that with 200 countries, figuring that one out. So I'm sure they have figured it out now. Terry, maybe you know more about that, Dr. Bachari. Where are we with that now, with the measurement of reductions?
I think it's pretty standard now, but it's really a question of how people sort of roll the dice. And some of them, I think what you really need now is a rigorous review of the emissions of every country. And I think institutions like this can play a very important role.
Right. No, thank you.
But the science is very clear now.
Okay, good.
Hello, Mr. Schwarzenegger. Well, thank you for being here with us. My name is Remy, and I'm a French student here at Sciences Po. Do you think that cinema is a good medium to convey the cause of ecology, and does this combination have a good future?
I think so, yeah. I never have done a movie where I try to sell some kind of a issue. Because to me, movies are entertainment. But if you can get it in a comfortable way, I think it's good. I mean, we've seen, for instance, over the years, by people smoking less cigarettes in the movies, that it has really had an effect and people started lowering and less people are smoking today than before, especially in the United States. And I think along when you pass laws and the public sector is involved and the policy is involved, and then you also show it in movies and in television where not everyone is smoking, but you have it smoke-free, those shows. Except my movies, they always have a cigar. I have a cigar in my mouth all the time. But normally, so that really was very helpful. So yes, you can. And remember that 3 Mile Island movie, what was it called? China Syndrome, yeah, exactly. That had a tremendous effect worldwide, and people started freaking out about nuclear power. And, and all of a sudden you saw less nuclear power plants being built all over the world. So it had really well, that's not movies. So I mean, we have done, for instance, Years of Living Dangerously, which is a documentary series that talks about the environment, and I'm one of the executive producers of that, and I did also a show where I was kind of the journalist and going in there and talking about that. So it's 1-hour shows. We won the Emmy for that show. It's a really fantastic show, and we're shooting now a second series about this. But this is, again, a way of really showing the world of the impact that pollution has and what we can do about it. So that's a very important way of doing it. And I always say this: communication, communication, communication. The way we present the facts and the way you have to do it without always beating up on people and making it positive also, showing them that here's the facts, that these are many people die if we don't do something about it, but at the same time showing them also the positive and the good things that are happening all over the world and how you can contribute. Because a lot of times you hear political speeches and you won't hear a message of what you can do. That it is up to you, and this is why I said in my speech, each and every one has the power to make the changes. It's up to you what car you're going to buy. It's up to you how many times you ride a bicycle. It's up to you, how are you going to wire the energy in your house. I mean, do you have a smartphone and do you control the air conditioning, the heaters and all this stuff? When you leave the house, you turn it off and it doesn't run. But then an hour before you go home, you turn it on again. We have the technology to do all of those things now. And so this is why I always recommend to people, get involved. Don't wait for the governments to do all of this. Government is not really equipped to take on this whole challenge by itself.
Maybe the last 2 questions there.
Good evening, Mr. Schwarzenegger. My name is Matt Bolton. I'm a student from Mion U.S. College studying environmental studies. I myself was born in Oregon, and Oregon, much like California right now, is suffering from a pretty major drought. It's rather unprecedented, actually. And we're not alone in this. On my way here, I talked to the wonderful man from Kenya. And when he talked to me about climate change, he didn't talk to me about rising sea tides or anything like that. There's other people who are dying right now in Kenya and all over the world from climate change. And you speak of air pollution, how that kills how it kills people by the thousands every day. Why is it that when we talk about climate leadership, we don't talk about adaptation? We don't talk about saving lives now from people who are dying from global warming in the present. And shouldn't we?
Absolutely, that was my point, that we should talk about what is going on now. And I just want to let you know that I think the drought in California, I don't know how it is in Oregon, but the drought in California, I don't know how much it has to do with global warming or not. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when we look back in the history, over the last 100 years, we have had droughts every 10 or 15 years. So we in California know there's a drought coming every 10, 15 years. So therefore, it is up to us to do something about it, so when we have a drought, that we have enough water. The problem really is that our politicians really have not yet gotten their act together and done something about it. Because if I know that, this is, we have infrastructure in California, especially in Southern California. As soon as it rains, all this water gets pushed out into the ocean as quickly as possible. You want to get rid of it. Oh my God, there's a flood. Let's get rid of the water. So that's how the infrastructure is built. So when then there's no rain, we have no water. We have to get the water from Northern California. Or we have to go and stop watering our lawn and things like that. So it's the wrong way to go. If we build the infrastructure, because we have 14 inches of rain every year in Southern California, we only need 4 inches of the rain in order to have enough water for everything. But we have 14 inches of rain every year, and we don't collect it. So now, finally, because this drought is more severe, everyone starts talking about collecting and building infrastructure and building systems and stuff like that to collect the water, if it is on the building or if it's a sports field or something like that, to collect water and so on. So it's an old technology that the Romans had. So we should adopt the technology, and then we will be absolutely fine when there's a drought, because we will have enough water for reserve. And eventually California is going to get their act together. So as I say, we're great when it comes to the environment. We're great on many different things and number one in many different industries, but there's still some serious problems. I try to overcome those problems. I try to do a water bond, but as you probably know the history of California, water, I mean, it's is a very sensitive subject, because the environmentalists are fighting the farmers are fighting the business community, the Southern California fights Northern California, everyone is fighting everybody. And so eventually they're going to solve that problem.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
The final question.
No pressure. Hi, sir. My name's Renee Mahale. I'm an American student here at Sciences Po. You recently did a documentary with Bill Nye on climate change denial. And I was wondering, if science isn't enough to convince people that there's a problem, what should we do?
No, I think that you can have all the science in the world, but if you don't communicate it the right way, then people will not connect. As I said, there is a disconnect right now, because for the last 20, 30 years, people have been talking about this climate change, and they talked about global warming, and they talked about rising sea levels. And how is someone in the middle of the United States relate to rising sea levels? They don't care. How does anyone relate to, when you live in Africa, about the glaciers melting? What do they care? The polar bear cannot jump from one ice to the next or something like that. So this is all stuff that means a lot to us. It breaks my heart when I see that, and it's terrible when we see the glaciers melting, but it doesn't mean anything to the general public. So we got to talk, or when people talk about beetle-infested trees in Colorado, and this is what creates all these fires and these wildfires and all this. Well, who is relating to that? So you can talk about beetle-infested trees and icebergs melting and rising sea levels and temperatures are going to rise. Yeah, someone in Siberia is going to say, great, I want the temperatures to rise. I mean, I'm freezing my butt off here, you know. So it doesn't mean anything. So we got to go and talk about things that really matter. And this is why I think it is important to have the scientists and to really give us the hardcore facts and figures. But then we have to do what every company does. Because any company in the world will tell you that you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't know how to sell it, and if the people don't know about this product, and if you don't have the right spin on it, it's not going to sell. So they spend millions and millions of dollars to hire an ad agency and to say, can you figure out how to sell this little car? How can you figure out how to sell my clothing line, because I'm competing with 1,000 other clothing lines. So then a guy will come and says, well, I'm going to get this great model, and we're going to age down the boots and make them dusty so they look rugged. I think we need to set the guy on a motorcycle so people can feel that it's a little rugged thing. So they start coming up with ideas that would be kind of like, you know, wow, I need to get this clothes. So, or I need to get this car. So it's about how do you sell? How do you communicate is so important, and this is what the scientific, that by making you feel guilty, they think by telling you, says, you shouldn't be driving this big car, you shouldn't have this flat screen TV, you shouldn't be burning the fire. To connect with the people, it's not going to connect at all. People say, well, the hell with you. I'm going to fly anything I want, and I'm going to burn as many fireplaces as I want. I'm not going to be part of this movement. So we got to make this movement attractive. And then every one of you and everyone out there that walks around the street would just say, I want to be part of this movement. This is really cool. We can save lives, and we can do this and that, and this is all I need to do is make a little adjustment to my lifestyle and all this. And that's, I think, what we need to do. So Bill Nye is a buddy of mine. And when he came to me and he says, let's do this science show together, I immediately liked it because it was a funny way to communicate, where he's lying on the couch and he's having a problem. And I am the psychiatrist, Dr. Schwarzenegger, right? And I'm talking to him about his denial problem, about being a climate change denial, living on the climate change denial node. So this is all different ways so we can reach the audience. And he, of course...
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I will say, if I can, also I will say to our students that we decided to start a cooperation between PSIA and the Schwarzenegger Institute. This is a great news.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.